I wasn't breathing? Oh. It's the breathing heavy that makes me, Ready? Good afternoon. My name is Bobbi Becker, and I'm here to talk to you today about how to live by choice rather than chance. But I want to start with something really quick that I think is kind of important. I'm a little bit different than the last time you saw me in January. I'm a little less green, and there's a little more color in my face. And last time when I was standing up here, I can honestly tell you when I was standing up here, I felt a little afraid. I felt a little bit of fear that I might die. Just a little bit. And then when I realized I couldn't continue in the class and I went to lay down, I felt a new fear. I felt afraid that I wouldn't die. Because following the H1N1 and moving into food poisoning is just something you really don't want to choose to do. So in that experience, I had a really deep appreciation for feeling health, the wholeness of health. But I also had this really deep appreciation for the fact that my body was telling me something. And it was really important to listen to it, which goes along with my talk today. You know, choice is an amazing thing. There's power in it. And most often, we forget that. I kind of there are some choices in life that are easy, and there are some choices in life that are a little bit more difficult. I think of penguins in that moment. I know, penguins. Why penguins? Well, you know, they're monogamous. They choose a partner, and they're with that partner forever. I just found that out. I find that interesting. I just found that out. I have an 8-year-old. How come I don't know that? But the most interesting thing about that is, why would they choose a different partner? They all look alike. It's an easy choice. I almost wish I had that choice. I might have saved myself 3 partners in that experience. But today I want to talk to you really about the power of that choice and how when we make choices, how we make choices. More specifically. Sometimes when we make choices through intention. And sometimes we make choices just by chance. Just by chance. When we decide not to make a choice, we're leaving sort of that option out there, in some cases for the universe to decide for us or others to decide for us. For example, when I choose not to make a choice, sometimes it might be because I'm afraid if I make a choice, I might offend others. That if I make a choice just for me, what does that mean? Does that mean I'm narcissistic? Selfish? And I've recalled some of the choices in my own life where I've said, I have to do this. I made this choice. I committed to somebody. I'm going to do it because I committed, knowing full well that that wasn't a good choice. That it was also my own prerogative and in my highest and best to choose for me each time. That ultimately, when I choose for me, I'm also choosing for other people. We make thousands of choices a day. Some of us make thousands of choices a day about what we wear. And the funny part about that is when I was getting ready to choose what I was going to wear here, my lovely wife, Janine, said, please make sure Noreen looks at it. I don't even know what that means. But there is such power in choice. And the thing about this is we make those thousands of choices. One of the things I've noticed is I just retired, by the way. This is my first week of retirement. Thank you. I am so excited. I'm excited every day because I get to choose other things. I get to choose a lot of things just for me. Before I retired, and when I was working at my job, I had quite a few people that worked for me. What I found is that there were choices that I made, specifically me. There were choices that my employees would make. And the choices that I made may have had a bigger consequence to some extent, but some of the choices my employees made also had bigger consequence. And what I found most often is, especially in the culture, I worked in the public sector, is people were really afraid to make a choice. There was a lot of fear around that. What if it's wrong? What if I make this choice and what we hope happens doesn't happen, then I'm going to get blamed for it? Because it's not okay in our culture to make a mistake. It is just not okay. And that's amazing. Because one of the things I was talking about earlier today with a friend was the fact that our worst fear is really not the worst thing that could happen. We are surrounded by a universe of possibility, infinite possibility. And we can use it for our highest and best if we choose. We can also choose not to. We can also choose not to. And it's in that choice that when we choose not to, that we sometimes think, why is this happening to me? We can also choose to perceive how something is happening to us. And that is also a powerful choice. I've spoken about this before. My mother was an amazing woman. She was diagnosed as being bipolar when I was 13 years old. And growing up with someone that is bipolar is very difficult. And as a child, you don't always understand why certain things are happening. And there were a lot of rules in our house that sort of centered around her fear and what she felt comfortable with. And as I moved into adulthood, I decided at a very early age, in my 20s, that I needed to readjust. That I needed to look at the ways in which I was choosing to cope in my life and find a way that would work better, because I was really seeing how some of the choices that I was making was creating even more drama in my life and actually creating more suffering. When my mother passed 2 years ago, what I really found to be most interesting in that was that over the years, when I first went into therapy, I was learning to cope differently. When I found Science of Mind, I learned how to change that story into the story that became powerful for me. And I learned to love her in a whole new way. Prior to that, I was really living sort of with that old story. I was living with the story my siblings told me, and I was really living, choosing something that I wasn't where I was truly consciously choosing, but feeling somewhat unconscious about it, which is what I call chance. Let me describe for you the difference between living by choice and living by chance. When you live by choice, the definition, an act of selecting or making a decision when faced with two or more possibilities. Chance, the absence of any obvious cause of events that can be predicted, understood, or controlled, usually trying to avoid accountability. A lot of times when we don't make choice, we think if we don't make that choice that we're preventing something from happening, and all we're doing is we're just allowing something else to happen. Just not necessarily probably our preferred desire or choice. About 15 years ago, I decided that I wanted to retire at 50. I had worked at the organization I just retired from already about 12 years. So I have a total of 27 years. Did I do that math right? Or did I choose to do that math right? I'm not sure. Could you do that math, Janice? I know I trust Janice math. But I decided to do that because I knew that there was something out there that was telling me that, one, if I decided to stay that long, I would stay till 50, but certainly not much longer than that. And in the public sector, that's not too unusual for people to stay a very long time. The one thing I wasn't sure of was how would it happen. I wasn't completely secure in the fact that I would find the way out, sort of find my way into that. Because I wanted to retire at an early age, but I didn't want to retire with just enough, or the feeling of just enough. I wanted to retire and say, if I choose not to work, I choose not to work. And at some point through that, of course, I went through practitioner and now in ministerial school. And what's really, really interesting about this is I set a goal. I set an intention in my choice. And when I set that intention in my choice, I said, I'm going to let go of how it's going to happen, but I'm going to open up to any door that shows. And if that doesn't look right, then I'll open up another door, knowing that there are many ways in which this could happen. And then when I see that door and it feels right, I'm going to step in through that door. So I'm going to take action. And then lastly, I'm going to trust. So ultimately, what ended up happening is I had to trust all the way through this because there are things that happen along the way. I don't say necessarily to test me, but things along the way that may push buttons that test me. Because I truly believe the universe conspires for my good. Ernest Holmes said, undoubtedly, each of us is now demonstrating his concept of life, but trained thought is far more powerful than untrained. And the one who gives conscious power to his thoughts should be more careful what he thinks than the one that does not. The more power one gives to thought, the more completely he believes that his thought has the power, the more power it will have. When we make a choice and we set an intention, how do we give power to that? We take action. We trust in it. We hold it out in front of us. We imagine, we vision what it really looks like. So as I've walked through this path of retirement, moving into retirement, one of the things that happened along the way is I have to put in a request for an estimate. What is it going to look like? I had to make a couple of choices that kind of made me a little bit nervous. Take some of my funds out, move them over here. I decided to do what's called purchase airtime, which is purchase service credit, which gives me a little bit more in my pension. For those of you in the public sector, that makes sense. For those of you who don't, you're like, what is that? Okay. But ultimately, I made some choices by listening and looking and seeing the things that were happening around me. I was sitting in a meeting. A woman sat down next to me, and she happened to be in our benefits department, and she said, Bobbi, I hear you want to retire. I said, yeah. She goes, did you purchase more airtime? I said, no. She goes, oh, well, you might want to think about it. It's going to expire in about 3 months. And I went, oh, that's interesting. Took a step, moved into it, looked at the options, did my ROI, went ahead and purchased it, trusted. So finally in all of this, what ended up happening is literally Thursday morning, I get my final, your pension is, we've done our full estimate, here's the final numbers, here's your pension, here's what it's going to look like. And the target that I set, it went over it by $25. I know that's kind of funny, but it literally was my target. And there was this obviously rush of relief, because I'll tell you, what's really interesting in this kind of process is retiring at this age makes a lot of people uncomfortable. In my workplace, I had a couple of reactions, and I even had one here, which was kind of funny because it reminded me. The reactions were this. One was, what are you doing? Are you sure you've thought about this? And I said, no, I just decided yesterday. I've done nothing to prepare. One guy even offered to walk me down to the benefits and walk through the numbers with me. The other was, well, what are you going to do? Have a plan. I use this as an example because the really interesting thing about this is I used to have nightmares about retiring for years. I always have this recurring nightmare. I'd wake up and there was nothing. I used to be afraid of being homeless because I sort of felt out there and very alone with the way in which my family dynamic was. This was a test for 15 years of walking down the path of something and making choices along the way and just trusting, taking those steps. Also being accountable. Because when you make a choice, you've decided, as I said earlier in the definition, you've decided to be accountable. And until you realize that the choices we make place us here, then there's no power in the choice because we don't recognize it. Stephen Covey says, until a person can say, I am what I am today because of the choices I made yesterday, that person cannot say, I choose otherwise. The beautiful part about this is we can choose different every moment. And there's nothing more beautiful in a gift, and it's the gift that keeps giving. Every single moment of our lives, and we can always choose different. We can always choose us. We have the right to choose what we want to experience in this adventure. We have the right to see the most amazing things and to experience those things. And there is not a soul in this experience that doesn't have that right. We have the right to create the experience we want. And there's such beauty in that, isn't there? And there's such power in that. And when we learn to trust ourselves in this experience of choosing, we realize that living by chance is so much smaller than who we really are. That when I live my life by choice instead of chance, I've recognized the divine nature of who I really am. I've realized that it is absolutely all me connected to all of you. Marianne Williamson, she said, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? It is the beauty and the multitude of choices that we have. So, there are 4 things that I've said today that I want you to take with you, to which to create power around your choice, or at least the awareness of the power in your choice. One is, when you choose, set an intention in that choice. 2, open your eyes and see. Don't miss all the doors that are opening every moment of every day. 3, take action. When you open the door, it's okay to pause. Just make sure you step through and step fully into that choice. Number 4, trust. Trust that you're not alone. Trust that you are part of something bigger and that you were not created to be small. Let's make choices that are for us, for our highest and best. And in doing so, we create a world that is and does work for everyone. Thank you. What worked is I trusted. I really stepped into today trusting that there's a message, regardless of what's here, there's a message that's coming out, and I need to trust what comes out. So that was what I learned. I would really like to be more